The black SUVs came without warning. 3 of them. Tinted windows. Moving slowly down the dusty street like something out of a movie nobody in that neighborhood had ever been invited to watch. And when they stopped, right in front of the Adeyemi compound, every neighbor who happened to be outside froze. Because nobody who drove cars like that had any business on this street. Inside the house, Emma was in the kitchen, washing plates, her mind on nothing in particular, when she heard the engines. She wiped her hands on her wrapper and moved to the window. One look at those vehicles and something shifted in her chest. A feeling she couldn't name. The kind that comes just before everything changes. She turned around slowly. And there was Sola, standing in the middle of the sitting room, completely still, staring at the door with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not fear exactly. Something closer to surrender. Like a man who had been running for a very long time and had finally decided to stop. Sola, she said quietly. Who are they? He didn't answer immediately. He just closed his eyes for a brief second, exhaled slowly, and when he opened them again, something in him looked different. Older. More settled. Like a mask had just slipped from a face she thought she already knew. I owe you an explanation, he said. I owe all of you one. Emma stared at him. 6 years. 6 years she had lived in the same house as this man. 6 years of watching him sweep floors, fix broken pipes, carry heavy things without complaint, eat whatever was left over from dinner without a word. 6 years of small conversations in the kitchen before the rest of the house woke up. 6 years of thinking she understood exactly who Sola was. And in that moment, looking at his face as those black cars sat outside like a quiet declaration, she realized she had never known him at all. Before we dive any deeper into this story, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and let us know where you're watching from. Whether you're watching from Lagos, London, Accra, Houston, or anywhere else in the world, tell us in the comments. We love knowing where our viewers are. And if you are new here and this is your first time watching, click that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. We tell stories that stay with you. Stories that make you feel something. Now let's go back. Sola Adewale arrived at the Adeyemi house on a Tuesday morning in late September, carrying a single black bag that looked like it had seen better days. He was 22 years old, lean but not unhealthy, with quiet eyes that moved carefully around the room before he himself entered it fully. He spoke in low, measured sentences and smiled only when something genuinely reached him. Not the kind of smile that people paste on to seem agreeable. The real kind. The rare kind. Mrs. Adeyemi had hired him through a neighbor's recommendation. They needed help around the house. Someone to clean, run errands, assist with the cooking occasionally, and generally keep things in order. The pay was modest. The room he would sleep in was small, barely enough for a single mattress and a narrow wooden shelf. The bathroom was shared with the generator room and it smelled like oil and mildew in the rainy season. Sola looked at the room, nodded politely, and said, "Thank you, Ma. I'll manage." Mrs. Adeyemi had already moved away by the time he finished the sentence. That was how it began. In the Adeyemi house, there were 3 people Sola had to navigate every day. Mrs. Adeyemi was the engine of the household, sharp-tongued, status-conscious, a woman who measured people with her eyes before they even opened their mouths. She was not cruel in the obvious way. She never beat anyone or screamed obscenities. Her cruelty was quieter than that. It lived in the way she addressed Sola as boy even after she knew his name. It lived in the way she would hand him plates with 2 fingers, like proximity itself might cost her something. It lived in her silences, long, pointed silences that said more than her words ever did. Mr. Adeyemi was a different kind of problem. He was not mean. He simply was not there, not fully, not in any way that mattered. He worked long hours at a government ministry, came home tired, ate his dinner, watched the news, and went to bed. Sola existed in his peripheral vision as a shape that kept the house functional. He would sometimes nod in Sola's direction if they crossed paths. Once, in 3 years, he said, "Well done," when Sola fixed a leaking pipe that a plumber had quoted 40,000 naira to repair. That was the full extent of their relationship. And then there was Emma. Emma Adeyemi was 24 when Sola arrived, 25 by the time he had properly settled in. She was studying for her second attempt at a professional examination, spending long hours at a small desk in her room with the ceiling fan squeaking above her head. She was her mother's daughter in some ways, organized, perceptive, able to read a room quickly. But she had something her mother didn't. She had a habit of looking at people. Not just seeing them. Actually looking. The first time she spoke to Sola beyond formalities, it was about a week after he arrived. She had come downstairs at 5:30 in the morning, unable to sleep, and found him already in the kitchen, boiling water for the day's chores. She stopped at the doorway. "You wake up this early every day?" she asked. He looked up, clearly not expecting anyone. "Yes, Miss Emma. I like to start before the house gets busy." She walked in and sat down at the small kitchen table, something her mother would have found odd and slightly inappropriate. "You want company?" "I can't sleep anyway." Sola blinked once. "If you want." That conversation was nothing significant. They talked about the neighborhood, about whether the borehole water was safe to drink, about a stray cat that kept getting into the compound. But something in it mattered. Because Emma spoke to him the way you speak to a person. Not a role. Not a function. A person. After that, early morning conversations became a quiet ritual between them. Never long. Never deeply personal. Just two people sharing the same early hour before the rest of the house made its demands. Emma would sometimes bring out a book and read while Sola prepared things. Sometimes they would argue, gently, about something completely trivial, whether Gary tasted better with cold water or warm, whether the old Nollywood films were better than the new ones. Small things. Safe things. But Emma noticed other things too. She noticed that Sola was extraordinarily intelligent. Not in a loud way. In the way he solved problems before they became problems. The way he understood how things worked, electrical fittings, plumbing, the car engine, without any apparent training. One evening she saw him reading, and she glanced at the cover of the book. It was not a novel or a religious text. It was a dense academic book on global supply chain economics. She had almost said something, then stopped herself. She didn't want to make him feel like she was checking up on him. But the image stayed with her. Stayed and gathered dust in a corner of her mind where she kept the things she didn't yet know what to do with. There was also the phone. Every domestic worker in that neighborhood carried a cheap Android phone with a cracked screen. It was practically a uniform. Sola's phone was different. She had only caught a glimpse of it once, when he thought no one was looking, sleek, expensive, quietly powerful. He tucked it away so fast she almost doubted what she had seen. Almost. And once, very late at night, she had been coming back from a neighbor's house and she walked past the small ventilation window that looked into Sola's room. She wasn't trying to spy. She was simply walking. But she heard something that stopped her feet without consulting her brain. He was on the phone. And he was not speaking Yoruba or Pidgin. He was speaking English, not Nigerian English with its beautiful rhythms and contractions, but formal, precise, international English. The kind you used in boardrooms and conference calls. Push the Accra meeting to the following Thursday, he was saying quietly. And tell them if the number moves below 14, we pull out entirely. Emma stood outside that window for exactly 4 seconds before her legs remembered how to move. She walked quickly back into the main house, her heart beating just slightly faster than usual, and told herself she had misheard. The walls were thin. Maybe it was a program on his phone. Maybe she was overtired. She went to bed and stared at the ceiling for an hour. She told herself it meant nothing. She was wrong. The months accumulated. 1 year became 2. 2 became 3. Sola remained exactly as he had arrived, consistent, quiet, unbothered. He didn't ask for raises, though Mrs. Adeyemi gave him small increments every year, more out of social obligation than genuine appreciation. He didn't complain about the room or the food or the way he was sometimes spoken to in that house. He simply continued to exist in it with a kind of calm that Emma found increasingly fascinating and increasingly strange. Other houseboys and domestic staff she had known in her life burned out, got restless, moved on. They came and went like weather. But Sola stayed. And the longer he stayed, the more rooted his presence became, until it was almost difficult to imagine the house without him. In his 4th year, Emma passed her professional examination and got a job at an accounting firm in the mainland. Life got busier. The early morning conversations became less frequent. She started leaving the house before sunrise and returning after dark, her mind full of spreadsheets and client files and office politics. She and Sola still spoke, but less. Sometimes an entire week would pass with nothing more than a nod across the compound. But she still noticed things. She noticed that he had begun to look different in small ways. Not physically, he was still the same slim, composed person. But there was something slightly more restrained about him now. Like a man consciously keeping something in a box, sitting on the lid, going about his business. She noticed he sometimes disappeared for hours on Sundays under the pretense of going to church, but he never talked about church the way people who went to church talked about it. He never came back with a bulletin or a hymn on his lips or the particular looseness that people carry when they have spent a morning in worship. Where did he go on Sundays? She never asked. And she told herself, again, that it was none of her business. Until the afternoon of the laptop. Emma had come home early from work, a client meeting had been cancelled. The house was quiet. Her parents were out. She was passing through the sitting room when she noticed Sola's personal laptop open on the kitchen table. He was nowhere visible. Probably in the backyard. The screen was not locked. She was not a snoop. She genuinely was not. But the screen faced her as she walked past, and the notification banner at the top was in large text, and her eyes processed it before her ethics could intervene. Transaction complete. Sender, Adewale Trust Holdings. Amount, $2,300,000 Emma stopped walking. She stood absolutely still, the way a person stands when their mind needs a moment to catch up with their eyes. Then she looked again, slowly, as though looking more carefully might change the numbers. It did not. $2.3 million. Received. Confirmed. Sitting there on a screen in her family's kitchen like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Her hand came up involuntarily and covered her mouth. She stepped back from the table. Looked at the doorway that led to the backyard. Looked at the screen again. Then she did something she would later feel complicated about. She leaned just slightly closer, not touching anything, just looking. And what she saw in those few seconds before she forced herself to step away rewired everything she thought she knew. There were emails in the sidebar. Names she recognized, not personally, but from the news, from business publications, from conversations at work. Companies. International companies. And Sola's name, not his name as she knew it, but a full name. Oluwasola Adewale. In signatures. In contract headers. In correspondence that moved millions of naira and dollars like chess pieces. She straightened up. Sola was standing in the kitchen doorway. She didn't know how long he had been there. His face was perfectly still. Waiting. There was no anger in his eyes. No panic. Just that same quiet watchfulness, but now with something behind it that she could only describe as inevitability. Emma, he said. Don't, she said. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. She cleared her throat. Don't tell me I misunderstood what I saw. He said nothing. Sola. She turned fully to face him. Who are you? The silence stretched. The ceiling fan ticked. Outside, a motorcycle horn blared and faded. I think, he said finally, that's a longer conversation than we have time for right now. Make time. Another pause. He walked to the kitchen table, slowly, and closed the laptop. Then he turned and looked at her, really looked at her, and for just a moment, the composure cracked, just slightly, the way a tightly held thing would tremble when the weight finally exceeds the grip. You should know, he said quietly, that everything I told you about myself was true. Where I grew up. My values. What I believe. All of that is real. Then what is that? She pointed at the laptop. He pulled out the chair and sat down. He folded his hands on the table with the careful deliberateness of someone who is deciding, right now, in real time, how much of the truth to pour out. My father, he said slowly, is Adewale Chief Suleiman Adewale. Emma stared at him. The name hit her like a slow wave. It took a moment to break. Then it broke. She had heard that name. Everyone in informed Nigerian business circles had heard that name. Adewale Holdings. Real estate, shipping, energy, banking. A man whose net worth had been estimated by a major African finance publication at figures most people couldn't say out loud without a small pause of disbelief. That's, she started. Yes, he said. Then what are you doing? She gestured at the house. The house her mother was so proud of, with its cheap tiles and the sitting room ceiling that had been stained by last year's roof leak. What are you doing here? Sola was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Emma sat down too, almost without deciding to. When he spoke, his voice was low and controlled, but something underneath it moved like deep water. When I was 19, he said, my father sat me down and told me I would inherit everything. Every company. Every property. Every account. And I asked him one question. He paused. I asked him how I was supposed to lead people I had never lived beside. How was I supposed to understand what workers felt, what ordinary people carried, if I had spent my entire life in the back of a car looking out at the world through tinted glass? Emma watched him. He didn't have an answer, Sola continued. So I found my own. I told him I needed to disappear for a while. To live without the money. Without the name. To be, he exhaled slowly. Nobody. And see what it taught me. Emma let that sit for a long moment. Then she said, 6 years, Sola. You stayed here for 6 years. Yes. You could have left after 6 months. I know. Then why? Because of this house. He said it quietly but with unexpected firmness. Because in this house, with your mother's coldness and your father's distance and the way most people in this neighborhood looked right through me, I found out everything I needed to know. I found out how people treat someone when they believe that person has nothing to offer them. He looked at her directly. And I found out that you were different. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. The kind you can feel on your skin. Emma swallowed. You should have told me. Maybe, he said. But if you had known who I was, you would never have spoken to me the way you did. Nobody does. They change. They manage themselves differently around me. I needed someone who was just, he searched for the word. Honest. Without knowing there was any reason not to be. Emma looked at the table. Then at her hands. Then at the man sitting across from her who she had known for 6 years and apparently had not known at all, and she felt something move through her, not quite anger, not quite sadness, but something composite and enormous that didn't have a clean name. She stood up. I need to think, she said. He nodded. I know. She walked out of the kitchen. And Sola sat alone at the table in the quiet house, listening to her footsteps go up the stairs. If you are still watching up to this point, type I'm still here in the comment section right now. We want to know you're with us, because what happens next is something we don't want you to miss. She did not tell her parents that night. She lay in bed with the ceiling fan turning slowly above her and turned the information over and over in her mind like a stone in a river, looking at it from every angle. $2.3 million. Adewale Holdings. 6 years. A man who had chosen to be invisible. It didn't make sense in the way things were supposed to make sense. And yet it made a terrible, perfect kind of sense that she couldn't argue with. Because everything she had observed about Sola over 6 years, the calmness that never cracked under her mother's sharpness, the intellect that seemed far too large for its surroundings, the phone calls she had half heard, the book about supply chain economics, the careful, deliberate way he carried himself even while performing the most mundane tasks, all of it assembled itself now into a picture that had always been there, waiting for the right light. She had seen it. She had fired it away. And she had chosen, for her own reasons, not to look directly at it. In the morning she was back in the kitchen before anyone else. Sola was already there. They looked at each other. "Does your father know you're here?" she asked. "Specifically here. This house." "He knows the general area," Sola said. "He's been patient. More patient than I deserved, probably." "Have you been running the businesses this whole time?" "Quietly. Remotely. My father handles the public face. I handle strategy." He paused. "It's why I needed the laptop." Emma poured herself water. Leaned against the counter. "My mother thinks she's a good judge of people," she said. Sola said nothing. "She's going to be devastated," Emma said. "Not about the money. About the fact that she stopped. About what it means. That she had you in this house for 6 years and treated you the way she did. She won't be able to forgive herself for that easily." "I'm not trying to humiliate anyone," Sola said. "That was never the point." "I know," Emma said. "But intentions don't control consequences." He looked at her. "No," he said quietly. "They don't." That day passed in a strange kind of suspension. Emma went to work. Sola went about his tasks. Her parents came and went. Nothing was said. But something had shifted in the air of the house, and Emma moved through it carefully, like a person crossing a room in the dark. She told herself she needed to decide what to do. Whether to say something to her parents. Whether to ask Sola when he planned to leave. Whether to. She stopped herself before she finished that thought. She went back to work. She stared at her screen. She didn't get very much done. 2 days later, the cars came. They arrived on a Thursday afternoon. 3 black SUVs, as described. 2 men got out of the first vehicle, not Sola's father, but obviously people who worked for him. Men in suits who stood the way people stand when they are paid to take up space. They knocked on the gate with a calm authority. Sola had been in the backyard. He came around the side of the house and saw Emma at the window, and their eyes met, and in that single exchange everything that needed to be communicated was communicated. He knew she had been expecting this. She knew he had been expecting it too. He went to open the gate himself. Mrs. Adeyemi had emerged from her room by then, drawn by the sound of the cars. She came down the stairs in her house clothing, intending to scold whoever had caused the noise, and stopped at the bottom of the staircase when she saw the men in the sitting room and Sola standing at the door with a stillness that was completely wrong for the occasion. "What is going on?" she demanded. "Sola, who are these people?" Sola turned to face her. And for the first time in 6 years, the way he stood when he faced her was different. Not disrespectful. Not triumphant. Just equal. Just a man standing the way he actually stood when no performance was required. "Mrs. Adeyemi," he said. "I need to speak to you and your husband together. There is something I should have told you a long time ago, and I'm sorry I didn't." She stared at him with narrowed eyes. "Tell me what? What is happening? And why are there cars outside my gate?" "Please," he said gently. "Let's wait for Mr. Adeyemi." 10 minutes later they were all in the sitting room. Mr. Adeyemi had been called from the study, and he sat with his habitual detachment, though even he could see that whatever this was, it required full attention. Emma sat slightly apart, her hands folded, watching everything. One of Sola's men had stepped outside to wait. Sola stood in the middle of the room that he had swept 1,000 times and said, "My name is Oluwasola Adewale. My father is Chief Solomon Adewale." The silence that followed was total. Mrs. Adeyemi's face did something extraordinary. It moved through at least 4 distinct expressions in the space of 3 seconds: confusion, dismissal, recalibration, and then something that looked almost like pain. Her hand came up slowly and touched her own collarbone. "Adewale," she said, as though the word had texture. "Solomon Adewale." "Yes, Ma." Mr. Adeyemi sat forward in his chair for the first time. He was looking at Sola with the focused attention of a man recalculating something significant. "You've been here," he said slowly. "In this house?" 6 years. "Yes, sir." "Doing," he gestured vaguely. "Everything I did," Sola said. "Because I chose to." Mrs. Adeyemi stood up abruptly. She walked 3 steps toward the window, then turned around. There was color in her face now. "Why?" she said. Her voice had lost its authority. She sounded, for the first time Emma could remember, genuinely uncertain. "Why would you?" She stopped. Started again. "How could you?" She couldn't find the end of either sentence. "I wanted to understand how people live," Sola said. "I wanted to earn the right to lead, not just inherit it. And I needed to do it honestly, without any protection the name would give me." Mrs. Adeyemi looked at him for a long time. And then she did something else Emma had never seen her do. Her eyes filled with tears. Not sentimental tears. The harder kind. The kind that come from suddenly seeing yourself from the outside and not entirely liking the view. "I spoke to you like," she started. "You spoke to me like I appeared to be," Sola said, not unkindly. "I'm not here to hold anything against you." "That doesn't," her voice broke slightly. She brought herself back with visible effort. "That doesn't make it right." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." Mr. Adeyemi had not spoken during this exchange. He was looking at his hands. Then he looked up at Sola and said, in a very quiet voice, "Did we ever make you feel like a human being in this house?" It was perhaps the most honest thing Emma had ever heard her father say. And the directness of it made the room feel suddenly smaller. Sola's eyes moved to Emma before he answered. "Once," he said. Consistently. "Yes." Emma was outside when he came to find her. She had slipped out during the weight of the sitting room and was standing in the compound near the borehole, her arms folded, looking at nothing in particular. The evening was coming in soft and orange through the gaps in the compound wall. She heard his footsteps. She didn't turn around. "They are arranging for your things?" she asked. "Yes," he said. A pause. "How long before you leave?" "Tonight," he said. "There are meetings I've delayed too long already." She nodded slowly, still not turning around. "Emma. Don't apologize," she said quickly. "I know you're going to apologize and I need you to not do that right now." "I wasn't going to apologize." She turned around then. He was standing a few feet away, looking at her with that expression she now understood differently, the one that had always seemed like composure but was actually something more deliberate. The look of someone who knows exactly what they feel and is being careful with it. "I need you to know," he said, "that every conversation we ever had was real for me. Every morning in that kitchen. Every argument about Gary. Every moment." Emma looked at him. "I know," she said. And she did. She had known that long before today, which was part of what made this so complicated. "I also need you to know," he said, more carefully now, "that I don't want to leave without saying something. Even if it changes nothing. Even if you tell me I've forfeited the right to say it." She waited. He stepped slightly closer. "Come with me, Emma. Not because of what I have. Not because of the name or the cars or any of that. But because in 6 years, you are the only person in my life who ever asked how I was sleeping without needing a reason to ask. And that is," he exhaled. "That is rarer than anything my father ever built." Emma was quiet. In the orange evening light, with the sounds of the neighborhood pressing softly against the compound wall, she looked at this man she had fed proper food on quiet mornings and argued with about water temperatures and caught reading economic theory in a room that smelled of engine oil. "Your world is very different from mine," she said. "Yes," he said. "You could have anyone." "I'm not talking about anyone." She looked at the ground. Then back at him. "I need time," she said. "I know." He didn't push. He simply stood there, which she realized was exactly right. The men who push when you say you need time have already shown you something. The men who wait have shown you something else. Will you? She started. I'll call you, he said. If you want me to. I want you to. He nodded once. And something in his face quietly rearranged itself, just slightly, just enough to show what had been held very carefully behind all those years of composure. Thank you, he said. For the mornings. For the food. For talking to me like I mattered when you had no reason to. Emma felt the back of her throat tighten. You did matter, she said. I know, he said. Because of you. He went inside to say his final goodbyes. Emma stayed in the compound a little longer, alone with the evening and everything it contained. She could hear her mother inside, not the sharp, managed version, but something more broken and more real, asking one of the suited men whether Mr. Adewale Sr. had known about the family. Whether Sola had ever complained about the treatment. Asking the questions that come too late but must still be asked. And Emma thought about 6 years. About every morning. About a man who had sat with her in a kitchen before sunrise not because he had to, but because he wanted to be, for just an hour, in a place where he was seen. She thought about the kind of person who can move through the world carrying something that large and choose, every single day, to remain humble. To remain kind. To remain open. Not as a performance. But as a genuine act of will. Then the gates opened and the cars began to move. She watched them go. And she already knew, somewhere beneath the noise of all her thinking, what her answer was going to be. This story, when you sit with it, is about more than a secret. It is about something every single one of us does every day without realizing it. We arrange people into categories by their clothes, their cars, their addresses, their accents, their job titles. We decide, in the space of a few seconds, what someone deserves from us, how much patience, how much warmth, how much basic human courtesy. And we give accordingly. Or we withhold accordingly. Sola had the rare and painful clarity of a man who experienced both sides of that equation from the same body. He knew what it felt like to be dismissed. He knew what it felt like to be invisible to people who had no idea what they were looking at. And he chose to use that knowledge not for bitterness, but for understanding. Mrs. Adeyemi was not a villain. She was a person who had learned to measure worth by visible things, which is something most of us are taught, in one way or another, long before we are old enough to question it. Her tears in that sitting room were not performance. They were the tears of genuine reckoning. The question is not whether we have ever looked at someone and seen less than they were. Most of us have. The question is what we do when we find out. Emma did something simple. Something that costs nothing and yet, apparently, is not as common as it should be. She spoke to Sola like a person. Not a function. Not a role. A person. She gave him her attention and her honesty without needing him to be anything other than what he appeared to be. And that ordinary, almost unremarkable act of basic dignity, that is what he carried with him for 6 years. That is what he came back to say thank you for. Think about the people in your life who you might be looking past. The person who makes your coffee. The cleaner in your office. The security man at your gate. The driver. The person on the other end of the phone. They all have a fullness of life that your brief encounter with them does not capture. They all carry stories. They all carry weight. And the way you speak to them, the 2 seconds of eye contact or its absence, the thank you given or withheld, it lands somewhere. It always lands somewhere. This is the story of a man who tested that truth deliberately, and a woman who passed a test she didn't know she was taking. We want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you genuinely for watching this story all the way to the end. These stories take time and care to build, and the fact that you stayed means everything to us. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if there is someone in your life it reminded you of, drop a comment and tell us what part of this story hit you the hardest. We read every comment. We really do. And if you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. Click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single story. We have more coming, stories that will challenge you, move you, and remind you of the things that actually matter. Because that's why we do this. Not just to entertain. but to remind each other, true story, who we want to be. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.